What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers. Really excited for this one. We're going to dive further into Phil Longo's offense, talk a little UNC, what Wisconsin's getting with these coaches, and also dip our toes into Wisconsin Badgers basketball with an insider. All that and more in today's Locked On Badgers. Super excited for this one. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. As always, really do appreciate everybody tuning in, helping to build this community as we talk about the Badgers every single day. It's been a blast. Really fun show today. We're going to bring Isaac Schade on. Excited for this one. He is the Locked On Tar Heels guy, Locked On College Basketball guy. Some of y'all tell me, I don't know how you do one show a day. He does 2 Locked On shows, so it's incredible. Isaac, thank you for jumping on, my friend.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. Love me some Wisconsin Badgers. I had a couple professors in college who were Wisconsin grads, so I've always had an affinity.
How'd you do in their classes?
One good, one terrible.
Love it. All right, let's jump in here because I wanted to start with Phil Longo coming over. Big news. We've talked about it a bunch, but nobody's watched it more than you have. You've seen it in person. What is he like as an offensive coordinator from your standpoint?
I mean, it's just fun. If we're being honest, it's just all about you. I kind of compare him to, like, you know how Coach Calipari at Kentucky basketball is all about like the players and putting them in position to win and lifting their name up and above his own. I kind of have always felt like that with Phil Longo. It's like, man, this is the Sam Howell show. I want to put Sam Howell front and center this year. This is the Drake May show, the skills guys, the line, the tight ends. I want to put them front and center. And so it's just fun because with this offense, you never know what's going to happen week in and week out. And I don't mean that in terms of like scheme or stuff like that. I just mean like crazy stuff happens in a Phil Longo offense.
That's phenomenal. You know, it's something he had his first presser the other day, and he mentioned we're going to be a player-driven offense. You're going to hear me say that a lot. We're going to put our guys in the best position and adapt to that. That's night and day, quite frankly, from what Wisconsin has done, where we've been we're going to run the ball no matter what offense. And
yeah,
we're excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the cool thing is part of that is like, I'm sure you've heard a lot like, hey, here comes this air raid offense and we're going to throw the ball 8 million times. But I think that's something of a misnomer, honestly, when we're thinking about scheme. It's really, as you talk about a player first offense, he is kind of, to me, a master of like, let me look at the skill set I have in front of me and let me put us in position to win based on that. And so some years like this year for North Carolina, where the running back room wasn't as strong. All right, so that means we're going to throw a lot and Drake May is going to be our leading rusher. Or 2 years ago, when you've got 2 guys now who are top 2 on NFL running back depth charts in Javonte Williams in Denver and Michael Carter for the Jets. Boy, it was almost like a little bit heavier of a run scheme. And so he's great at like not losing identity, but how do we maintain who we are, but make some nuanced tailoring to the skill sets that I have to work with.
You know what's impressive about that? That feels like a bit of I don't want to say egoless, like all coaches have some type of ego, but a lot of coaches force their scheme on whoever they have just because that's who they are. To be able to adapt to your players, it feels a little egoless.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's a better coach, is somebody who's versed enough to not just say, hey, I have this one thing that I do really well, so I'm going to come force it on you and make you do it that way. It's like my background is ministry. And so I often think in terms like this. This might not help a lot of people, but I grew up on the missions field. And missionaries, when they go to a foreign country, they don't go say, hey, here's how you be an American. They go to Kenya or wherever it is, learn how to be a Kenyan, and then say, okay, so here's these principles that work in Kenya. And I kind of think of Phil Longo that way as an offensive coordinator. Like, I'm going to come to Wisconsin, see what I have in the stable, what personnel I'm looking at. I'm going to take a lot of the principles, like the seeds of what I know. I'm not going to uproot a tree from Chapel Hill and try to plant it in Madison. I'm going to take the seeds of what I know, plant those in Madison, Wisconsin soil, fertilizer, whatever, and then grow a tree there. Does that make sense?
I love that analogy
Yeah.
on so many ways, because really was Phil Longo coming in with a system that is going to emphasize throwing the ball more. Even again, if we're being adaptable to what we have in the stable, he's going to throw the ball more. He's going to try quarterbacks. That feels like a missionary coming to Wisconsin. That feels like an emissary from another world for us. So I actually think that analogy works on so many levels.
Hey, sure.
But I think it's a great analogy. And one of the things we have seen, just continuing this conversation about Phil Longo coming in and some change, we've seen just a hailstorm of quarterbacks come to Madison. You know, we picked up Nick Evers as a 4-star quarterback at Oklahoma. We have a 4-star quarterback from 24 committed. We got Tanner Mordecai from SMU. And every one of these quarterbacks has talked about Phil Longo. And I want to lead that into a question about his recruiting acumen. But so far in Madison, we've never seen quarterbacks come in like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it speaks to Phil Longo as a person. It speaks to Phil Longo as a coach. It speaks to Phil Longo as a quarterback whisperer. I mean, even the two quarterbacks he had under him at Carolina, Sam Howell was not an initial North Carolina commit. He was going to Florida State. Drake May was not an initial North Carolina commit, despite the family pedigree. He was headed to Alabama and chose to come to North Carolina. So like you saw it in North Carolina, you're already seeing it at Wisconsin. Quarterbacks want to play for this man.
Is he a better quarterback developer or quarterback recruiter? And it's kind of a circular argument, right? Because if you get better talent, it's easier to develop it. But where is his greatest strength lie there?
That's a fantastic question, Ryan. And I'm going to kind of talk my way into figuring out how I want to answer it, honestly. Because the reason being is both of these guys, Sam Howell and Drake May, that he had at North Carolina, were both highly talented players. But I firmly believe that he developed and elevated them higher than they would have been with other coaches. And so I know I'm kind of sitting on the fence there with that, but I truly believe it, because one of the things I had written in my notes to kind of talk about today is that I believe, and not just with quarterbacks, but across the board offensively, I think he takes good players and makes them great from a development standpoint. And I think he takes great players and elevates them to elite status.
And then let's finish up here maybe with Longo. And that's really well answered, by the way. Not everybody, certainly no coach is perfect, no player is perfect. We're all growing and getting better. What about Longo maybe made UNC fans pull their hair out? We've seen complaints about red zone efficiency. What about Longo's maybe a little, or better question, how have teams schemed to beat Longo's offense?
Great. Well, part of it is like going back to that, he's going to adapt to his skill set. So, and I should mention that that's not a game to game situation. He's going to figure out like, who are we going to be this season? It's not going to be we're going to react to whom we're playing. We are going to be who we're going to be this season. So Wisconsin 2023 will be Wisconsin 2023, not Wisconsin week 1 2023 Wisconsin, if that makes sense. And so for North Carolina this year, if anyone, I'm sure a lot of people have looked at the numbers and the schedule, things were unexpectedly fantastic for the first 8-9 weeks of the season for North Carolina this year, with the lone loss coming to Notre Dame. And you understand that before a 4-game losing streak to end the season to Georgia Tech, NC State, Clemson in the ACC championship game, and then just a nail biter to Oregon in the Holiday Bowl in Petco Park there. But so what I think the way to scheme against it is you got to figure out what the special sauce is that given season, if that makes sense. So for this year, that meant what Georgia Tech, what NC State, what Clemson did is they found ways to slow Drake May down. In previous years, it was, okay, so we got to not necessarily cut off Sam Howell, but how do we stop Josh Downs, who's North Carolina's leading receiver? Or 2 years ago, how do we force, like, let's slow down Javonte Williams and Michael Carter coming out of the backfield and force Sam Howell to just throw all over the place. And so that's some of it. Some of the, and you and I were talking about this before we came on, but some of the red zone efficiency issues are something of a late season misnomer this year. The first 9 games of the season, Carolina scored 0 points on only 4 different red zone trips. 3 of those were end of game victory formation kneel downs. Carolina just finished the game in the red zone. But then it really kind of fell apart down the stretch. And in some past seasons, the red zone efficiency hasn't been there, partly because in that air raid style, a lot of what you get are these just take the top off of it, kind of passes. And so some of the frustration will come in. Like when those are hitting, boy, it's nice and it's a quick strike. But when you miss some of those, you put yourself behind the sticks a little bit, and then you have to get into that running game. And so that's where probably the biggest fan base frustration will come in.
That's really good. Is there any type of when we're looking at Longo, does he feel like the type of guy in 2 or 3 years is going to be a head coach, or do you think he's more of an offensive coordinator through and through?
I think that he is an offensive coordinator through and through. I just don't see his temperament is so even keel, like in a really good way, like doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. You won't see him on the sidelines yelling. I think it's a great thing for players because they feel like, oh man, Coach Longo looks serene over there. So we're going to be okay. But it feels like he's more of a, I want to be the guy right behind the guy. So right behind Luke Fickell, right behind Mac Brown or whatever it may be, And so, I'm not saying he won't get a head. There were rumblings towards the end of this year of some schools looking at him. I just don't see that as like being where he would be in his wheelhouse. I think he is in his wheelhouse as an OC quarterbacks coach kind of guy because he's just so good in that lane.
Right. Now, I'm curious on this, and certainly basketball, this question on the basketball side would be completely different. But on the football side, and there's really not a right or wrong answer here, but when Phil Longo announced he was leaving North Carolina offensive coordinator position to go to Wisconsin offensive coordinator position, did North Carolina fans look at that as a lateral move? Or did they look at that as a bit of a step up? Just out of curiosity.
There's a couple pieces to that. I think they looked at it as a complete, or I know I did, and a lot of others did as well, as like, huh? Because it's Wisconsin. And that's not saying anything bad about Wisconsin. It's just matchup of offensive styles, offensive schemes, where it just felt completely out of left field to a lot of people, right? Like, hey, I think most people were like, Phil Longo's probably gone this year, unless it's like, man, I get another year with Drake May. Let me stay and do that, right? But so I think from that point of view, it was a little confusing or confounding. But when you start to think about it, where it does make a lot of sense is the ACC's grant of rights deal is got a long way out. And so the money is just nowhere near like the Big Ten's new negotiated deal. And so whether it's lateral or step up, oh boy, when you look at what the bottom line has got to be, and I don't know the numbers on it, but the Big Ten schools, the SEC schools, there's just a different level of money they can offer. And so like when you look at things like that, it makes sense. And then when you look at, like, one of my thoughts was, well, this isn't going to work at Wisconsin. But when you start to look at it, Ryan, like if Coach Fickell is committed to this, and in the NIL transfer portal era where it's like, hey, you can remake your skill set now. And there's no excuse not to, right? Like you go out and get the guys you need to do what you need to do. Part of that is that he'll be able to do that, but also goes back to what I said earlier, that Coach Longo is able to take guys and kind of elevate them to what he needs them to do, or can find ways to put them in the position to do what they best do within what he can do, if that all makes sense. And so the more I've thought about it, I'm like, dude, this is a big risk for Wisconsin. But if it works, this could take the Big Ten by complete storm and surprise, because who else is doing this in the Big Ten? And so if it works, could be really good.
We're excited. We're already counting the national titles we're going to win in the next 10 years. I think the over-under's at like 6.5. So we're pretty excited.
Makes sense. Move over Michigan, move over Buckeyes. Here come the Badgers.
Listen, sometimes, and you know this, sometimes change is exciting.
Absolutely.
Even outside of the reasons for it or what that change is, and this is a good change, I think, but even just change itself can be exciting when you've seen one thing for 2 decades, right? So there's an element of that. All right, coming up, I do need to pick your brain. We do need to take a quick break, but I want to pick your brain. Another North Carolina coach coming over, and also maybe just a quick talk on NIL. We heard some crazy numbers with Drake May. Just get your feel on where that is. But that's coming up next with Isaac Schade. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Built Bar. I've talked about Built Bar a lot, right? It is my healthy go-to. It's something that I keep hidden. but I don't keep it hidden too well because my kids will dive into it and they think they're stealing candy bars, but really they're just eating healthy. I talk about it a lot. You got to take your hidden dad wins where you can get them. That's a little one. They're off on the corner pretending to eat their candy bars. It's really Built bars, protein, 100% real chocolate, but not a lot of sugar, not a lot of calories. A phenomenal snack if you're trying to get a little healthier. Just something to get you through the day if you need one of those mid-afternoon snacks. And again, the flavors are incredible. You're not eating cardboard like other protein bars on the market. It's churros. It's the coconut almond, the peanut butter brownie. Incredible flavors, and they've gone mainstream. Now at Locked On, we got in at the ground floor, but now they're in Walmart, Sam's Club. Go to Walmart, pick up a 4-bar box, or Sam's Club, a 13-bar box. You're not going to regret it, and you'll thank me later. When you're done here, make sure you go check out Locked On College Basketball. Again, everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Make sure you go check that out after this show today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's bring Isaac back on, one of the hosts of said Locked On College Basketball. Isaac, definitely want to give you an opportunity. Where can people find your work, not just with the Tar Heels, but college basketball as well? Wisconsin fans are definitely into that.
For sure. The place I am most active is on Twitter. Just my name, at Isaac Schade. 1 S, 2 A's in Isaac, and there's a C in Shade. It's a German phrase that means what a pity. I don't even know, but it is what it is. So that's where I'm most active, but both shows have a Twitter account. We'd love for you to join us on Locked On College Basketball. It's just about 2 months old now, and it's growing rapidly, especially as we get now into basketball season. We're doing it 5 days a week, just like the other shows. Would love to have you join us.
I love it. We're going to talk basketball in a second, but first I want to wrap up with football. North Carolina coaches coming over. The offensive line coach, Jack Bicknell Jr. comes over. Not there a long time, but what can you tell us? Yeah, understatement. What can you tell us from the time he was there and what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was kind of hilarious, Ryan, honestly. So Jack Bicknell last year in 2021 was at Louisville. And so we start spring practice 2022. Get through day one of spring practice. Jack Bicknell is at Louisville's practice for the first day. Day 2, he is in Chapel Hill. So, I mean, it's like literally spring practice is going on, and Mac Brown hires him, and then he's in Chapel Hill coaching the O-line like the next day. I mean, it's just kind of wacky. But here's the thing. Phil Longo and Jack Bicknell have coached together before. And so in 17 and 18 at Ole Miss. And so they have history together. Jack Bicknell has this long coaching tree family that he's been part of. His dad was the head coach at Boston College for a long time. And in fact, Bicknell was the offensive line coach in Matt Ryan's senior year when he was just lighting the world on fire at Boston College. And so pretty cool. His line was the one paving the trail for all of that. But similar to Phil Longo, has been all over the place. This is his 8th college stop, had 4 different NFL teams in between. And so, yeah, as you said, and with that spring practice move, was only in Chapel Hill. I mean, clearly less than a calendar year. And so really, like you alluded to, we didn't really get too much of a flavor for what he was going to do because there was no time to recruit anyone and bring them in to be part of his line, but did inherit kind of a line in transition. Carolina lost several guys after the 21 season to the NFL, 2 of whom are playing for the Giants now. And so was kind of bringing some new guys in, got a transfer from Miami, Corey Gaynor, and Spencer Holland from Harvard to go along with some of Carolina's returners. One of the weird things was he talked about coming in, Coach Bicknell did, hey, I want to be 10 deep on the line. So basically 2 at every position. And then it just never really materialized, where they really relied heavily on the 5 starters and had a little bit of a mixture. But that was like just the weird thing to me this year. Because also the line wasn't that great, quite frankly. Drake May, thankfully, is mobile and was Carolina's leading rusher, as I said earlier. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, if you're not going to do that, there's like, you don't owe it to us to say, hey, I'm going to roll 2 deep at every position and then not do it. So it's like, you just shouldn't have even said it. Right. And right. So now here's the thing. He is a long tenured coach. He knows what he's doing. Let's imagine that Wisconsin's going to have infinitely better offensive linemen as part of the Big Ten than Carolina does. And so there's going to be more to work with there. I would highly imagine. I haven't dived into Wisconsin offensive line at all. And so you would be able to speak to that obviously much better than me, Ryan. But I think it's going to be helpful that these two guys have coached together multiple times now. And you just like, they get each other. They know, there's just those in-game things when you're with somebody you're comfortable with that's different, where you're able to just give a look or just a nod and you get what they're saying rather than having to go like and figure stuff out. So yeah.
You understand the culture that the other person's bringing to the table.
Bingo.
Yeah. I want to come to here and then I want to talk basketball. I'm going to shotgun you with this question a little bit. We didn't really discuss it, but I do just want to get your quick take on Drake May, fabulous young quarterback, was reportedly offered by multiple schools around $5 million through the portal. This came out on social media in a couple different spots. When you saw that number, I'm curious, was your reaction, oh, wow, that's a ton of money, or, oh, wow, yeah, obviously?
Yeah, I think it was more the latter because he's doing that at North Carolina. And obviously under Phil Longo's offense, it makes sense to do it. But here's the thing, Ryan, coming into the season, Mac Brown did not announce him as the starter until game week of week 0. Carolina played one of the few teams that played week 0. So it was that week where we learned Drake May would be the starter over Jacoby Criswell, who has since transferred to Arkansas. Now, most of us who are kind of inside assumed all along it would be Drake May, but it's like, why isn't he announcing it if that's going to be the thing? But after losing Sam Howell, who most people thought was the best quarterback in Carolina history, the majority of people were like, hey, it's going to be a down year. And so to take a massive step forward, even though the losing streak at the end of the season was unreal. And so everyone is all in on Drake May. I mean, people are going to nitpick because that's what they do, right? But he is phenomenal. Were it not for that Georgia Tech game and NC State game at the end of the season would have been a no-brainer invite to New York for the Heisman ceremony, was legitimately in that type of conversation. And so, yeah, that kind of money, not shocking in any way. But I also wasn't surprised that he stayed because of a couple things. Number one, there's a big family lineage at North Carolina with the May family. His dad was North Carolina's quarterback a couple decades ago. His brother Luke was part of North Carolina's 2017 national championship game. Some will probably remember he hit a game-winning shot to beat Kentucky in the Elite Eight that year and just became like a cult hero at North Carolina. His other brother is currently a walk-on for the Tar Heels basketball team. So there's just this lineage at Carolina. And hearing the type of young man he is, it was like, nah, he wants to be here. Here's kind of the best way to put it. The same day that, because the announcement came out about Coach Longo and Coach Bicknell leaving within like an hour and a half of each other. Literally that same night, I remember I was at my wife's work Christmas party and I'm like, I got to be dialed into this, but now I'm getting all these messages. What am I going to do? Well, that same night, Drake May comes out on Twitter and says, nah, I'm staying, because he understood that the fan base was losing their collective minds. And the one thing that someone can do is Drake May can be this calming presence to say, I ain't going anywhere.
You need the lighthouse. It's funny. As soon as Longo came, how many Badger fans instantly looked at. So we saw that night Drake May come out, and we were all like, "No!" we had the opposite reaction, right? Obviously, we were greedy, and could Drake May be coming? So no, that was a very cool thing that he did, though, to kind of calm the fan base, because a lot of people wouldn't do that. They would let it draw out, and speculation gets crazy. Yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Come back, talk college basketball. The Badgers on a not as surprising to us, but maybe nationally surprising. I don't know. We'll ask Isaac what he thinks of the Badgers coming up next. But first, a quick break for friends of our show. We're going to bring Isaac back on. Isaac, thank you again so much for jumping on the show. Really, really do appreciate your time. Incredibly gracious of you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk Badgers basketball. Coming into the season, picked anywhere 8th, 9th, 10th in the Big Ten, currently ranked. Have the Badgers surprised you this year?
They have, I think, in a lot of ways, because they surprised me last year. I don't think, at least nationally, again, maybe you guys in Madison saw it coming. I did not, hand up, I did not see the Johnny Davis breakout happening. And boy, did it. And so you lose him. And perhaps even more importantly, you lose Brad Davison, who had just been this, you talk about that lighthouse, that to me was Brad Davison. He and all his charges drawn encompassed Wisconsin basketball for me. You know what I mean? It was just, he was that guy. And so I was like, listen, under Greg Gard, it's not quite the Bo Ryan level where you're just lock Wisconsin in at 20th every preseason under Bo Ryan. Greg Gard's not quite to that level for me, but is incredibly solid where I trust him. But still, you lose those two guys, one who was just a program mainstay and one who had this breakout, kind of similar to Keegan Murray at Iowa last year that you didn't see coming. And it's like, boy, I don't know what Wisconsin's going to do. But when you get these three guys coming back, and I don't think I accounted for how great Chucky Hepburn would be. I think because of the Johnny Davis of it all last year, like I just didn't see what a solid and steady presence he could be, even as kind of a freshman or this year's sophomore, playing kind of with wisdom beyond his years. How important Tyler Wall was coming back, or Stephen Crowell, like these guys, I think is massive. And what Stephen Crowell has been able to do kind of as a 7-footer, leading the team in assists, like to be able to play through and facilitate a 7-footer, ain't many teams in the country can say they're able to do that. So I was surprised. But when I started going back and looking at it, I was like, no, these guys are developing in ways that you want to see college basketball players developing that I think we just don't necessarily expect as much of anymore in the NIL transfer portal era. So it's been a very pleasing thing to me as someone who just loves to see young men develop and grow and get better as a team.
And let's talk about, I mean, Johnny Davis is the exception to this, but Wisconsin, one of their sweet spots, I would love to just get your opinion on this, is to find the 4-year guy that's a really good college player, but not quite good enough to jump to the league. Yep. Like Chucky Hepburn to me is that guy. He's going to be there 4 years because he doesn't have NBA measurables, but he's a really good college point guard.
Yep, absolutely. And those are the best teams. Like an example. So me as someone who follows the ACC most closely, like a great example of this is Duke. Duke gets these unbelievably talented players year in and year out. I mean, you cannot deny that they're going to be a top 5 roster annually in terms of talent. But that just cannot all like it can. You have to have a certain level, as you're saying, but it does not match up to the level of experience and talent. So it doesn't just take experience. It doesn't just take talent. But man, when you have that sweet spot combination of experienced talent, give me that every day of the week. And so this is what coaches, I think some of the best coaches in the country are trying to do, is how can we recruit these guys that are like maybe in the 40 to 80 range in terms of their high school ranking, who are like really highly talented guys, but not so talented that, as you said, they're going to jump ship after a year, maybe even 2, unless there's the Johnny Davis blow up like you referenced. And so when you have a coach that can get those guys and then develop and recruit them and build a legitimate program instead of a 1-year mercenary team, that's the basketball I want to watch every day of the week.
Agreed. And I think it's a way for teams that can't recruit at that level, that's how they balance it out. I always thought some blue bloods miss that a little bit. Like if you could balance your team, like you said, of lottery picks with a Tyler Ulis type who can be there for 4 years, right? Yep. I know you're familiar with Ulis's game. That type of player, I think, you look at Wisconsin, Stephen Crowell's that type of player, Tyler Wall's that type of player, Chucky Hepburn's that type of player. They fill a roster with those guys when everything's going right. Now, They also need that high level talent. That's the area that they sometimes are missing, because you also need that dude.
That's the exact thing. Is a lot of times you look at these teams that either go really far in the tournament or win it, and you're like, oh, this dude had a chance to go in the draft last year, but he decided to come back, which is going to happen now more than ever thanks to NIL. I know NIL has all sorts of issues, but I love what it's doing for college basketball, bringing all sorts of name brands back to college basketball, which is going to bring more eyeballs back to the sport. And so when you're able to do that, boy, it changes things. And so you look back and it's like, oh, now I know why that mid-major team was so good. They had this dude named Dwayne Wade on it, and he's okay at basketball. Like it's that kind of thing where you've got to have that mix, as you said, of like at least one high-level freshman or somebody that just comes in that can mix in with a veteran, experienced team and just do it. And I know, like an example at Wisconsin this year, I know he's not ultra elite high level, but Connor Essegian, like, he is doing infinitely more than I thought or expected him to do this year. But shooting, he's like 44% from 3 right now, and he's got like 60 plus attempts from 3. What he's able to add as a freshman in with these 3 returners I talked about, because that's one of the things coming into the season. It's like, yeah, Greg Gard has those guys that we talked about, Wall and Crowell and Hepburn, but who's going to do it beyond that? I think what Essegian's been able to do so far this year has been more than most people probably expected.
Yeah, and you nailed it on the head. Actually, it's shooting with volume, right? That's the key. Being able to shoot at a high percentage, but also be able to do it on 4 or 5 attempts a game that really stretches the defense. And Connor's still just figuring it out. That's his shot is pure, and he has a bit of a mid-range swagger to him, but he's not quite there yet. So he's going to keep developing as well. And honestly, he's probably another guy in that Hepburn category that isn't a 6'5" guy. He's not elite athletically. He might be there 3 years. I want to ask you this because Wisconsin did this last year and kind of finish up here. Wisconsin did this last year. They've done it so far this year, close victories. They're racking them up. I think they have 7 this year that are 5 points or less. They were incredible last year at it. I go back and forth with the Wisconsin fan base all the time on this. I tend to continue to think it is just a bit of a lucky, I don't want to say lucky, right? Closing out games is a skill there, but I don't know how much of a skill it is. And I'm curious your take on it.
Yeah, there's this weird balance. There are teams that just have that knack for winning those games. There, whether it's team, like I always think that about Kansas is a team that like I'm never going to count out Kansas because they just know how to do it. They've got a fantastic coach on the sideline in Bill Self, and so it's like that team has a knack for winning close games. So I think there legitimately is something to that. But there's also this law of averages where it's like eventually you're going to have regression to the mean. And so it's like, man, Wisconsin's been doing a great job of winning these close games. And like, I think Essegian himself, like kind of sealed that overtime victory over Iowa, if I remember correctly, and then survived a 3-pointer at the buzzer. But it's like, I think there is a balance. I legitimately think there are teams that just know how to win in crunch time and can do that. They don't tighten up and go one-on-one. They continue to play within their offense. They continue to defend as a unit. And so I think there's something to that some teams can do and others can't. But yeah, I think you do have to be wary and cautious of that eventual regression to the mean. And you hope it doesn't come. You hope you stave it off. I was looking earlier at Wisconsin's stretch coming up here. Like this game at Illinois today on Saturday, really important game. I know Illinois has been kind of roller coaster this year, but man, the computer numbers like them a little bit more than Wisconsin right now. And so a big game. And then next you got a home game against Michigan State this week. Malik Hall is back for them. So that is no gimme game. And then next Saturday, you got to go to Assembly Hall and take on Trace Jackson Davis. So like, I think we're going to learn a whole lot about Wisconsin in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Big Ten in parts of it are just a meat grinder, and Wisconsin hasn't matched up with Purdue yet either. It's going to be a meat grinder, and there is, if we're going to talk about a soft spot on Wisconsin, there is no front court depth behind who's actually now battling a sprained ankle as well.
An ankle injury, right? Is he going to be available? Have you heard yet?
Game time. Which honestly, middle of the season, like that's. I hate to say you punt on a game, but if it's Tyler Wall 70-80% because of an ankle, you punt on that game and you get him 100%.
100%. I'm all on board with that decision. Yep.
All right, everybody. He is Isaac Schade. So grateful for jumping on. We're smarter because you were here. Go check out his excellent work at Locked On College Basketball, also Locked On Tar Heels. And for everyone else tuning in, we're going to talk to you tomorrow on Wisconsin, and let's keep it going.